Welcome back to CVTV News. Thanks for sticking with us.
She was once a rum runner's yacht, or so the old-timers told arriving new sailors. The new arrivals aboard the USS Sumner, AGS-5, didn't know whether to believe it or not. She had a sleek design with a long prow and didn't fit the image of a conventional Navy vessel. The reality, however, was that she was built in 1915 as a submarine tender and switched identities in 1940 to become a hydrographic survey vessel. There was nothing about the USS Sumner that made her appearance look dangerous to the enemy. My dad used to say that with a top speed of 12 knots and one 3-inch gun mounted aft, the best she could do was fire on her attackers as she was trying to get away. During her active service, she earned 3 battle stars, but with only one exception, she never successfully fired on the enemy. That one exception, however, was at Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941, 78 years ago. Most people with any hint of a nautical background will often describe their ships and boats in terms of human personality traits. To them, vessels, whether rowboats or aircraft carriers, are alive. And with apologies for the obvious sexism, vessels are usually feminine. She's a good ship, or she is slow to turn, but fast when you wanted her to be. And of course, she was a happy ship, or on other occasions, she was not a happy ship. The Sumner, by all accounts, was a happy ship. However, given that her mission was particularly technical and scientific, the ship had a tendency to be a little quirky. My dad, Roger T. Kerr, joined the ship's company in 1944 and referred to the Sumner as different. That was also the same term he used to describe his offbeat great uncle, an early practitioner living off the grid, who homesteaded by himself in the Arizona desert. This trait also extended to the way the ship's officers and crew tended to view regulations and directives. Though Navy through and through, the ship was always pristine and combat ready, they still weren't always that interested in doing things the Navy way. A good example of this came early in December 1941, when an order went out to all ships at anchor in Pearl Harbor to stow their anti-aircraft ammunition below deck. This was apparently for safety reasons. Given the state of the world at the time, it seems like a strange order. Still, most ships were used to following such directions, and to the latter at that, and complied. However, the Sumner either didn't get the word, always a possibility, or chose just to ignore it. It's not clear which. Its anti-aircraft ammunition remained on deck. When the Japanese attacked on Sunday morning, December 7th, the Sumner, like every vessel at Pearl Harbor, was preparing to raise the colors. That happens at 8 a.m. in the morning. However, as we well know, 78 years later, that morning didn't go as planned. The ship's log notes that at 07:59, the ship went to general quarters. According to the Sumner's logs, aircraft with red disc on their wings were attacking. The Sumner was anchored near the submarine base. Remarkably, this meant that she was ideally positioned to fire on the enemy aircraft as they began their bomb runs on the battleships anchored to Pearl Harbor. The Sumner herself was never a target. The Japanese weren't the slightest bit interested in the Sumner, but her anti-aircraft guns at the ready began firing almost instantaneously. Her gunners were tireless, and their aim was surprisingly deadly. Remember, up until that point, none of the crew had ever been in combat before. Sadly, other ships, those that had obeyed the Navy's order to stow their ammunition, faced a devastating delay trying to haul ammunition back to the guns while the attack was actually taking place. The Japanese attack came in 2 waves and continued until about 10 a.m. The Sumner, throughout it all, caused as much damage to the attacking aircraft as she could, and claimed the downing of at least 3 aircraft. Given that U.S. forces only downed 29 Japanese aircraft that day, it was an impressive performance for a hydrographic survey ship. She would never do that again. She would be in her harm's way a number of times and even get hit by a shell on Iwo Jima. Her survey crews were often in the midst of the battle. But like a lot of people at a moment of crisis, the Sumner, arguably an oddity amongst all the heavily armed ships that were surrounded her, proved that even an odd-looking ship that didn't follow the rules could do remarkable things.
I love that story, David. I feel like I was there. Well, here's another story about Pearl Harbor, and I think you'll like this. There are certain events in history, not many, but some, that happen very quickly and mark a prompt turning point between what was and what was to be. Essentially, after they happen, nothing is ever quite the same again. Just such a day occurred 78 years ago, this week on December 7th, 1941. This was the day the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. As David explained, all at once we went from being a nation at peace to one fully embroiled in a nightmare that was World War II. But on that morning, a Sunday, Pearl Harbor felt and smelled like it always did. Warm breezes and the scent of tropical flowers. There's a reason the people in Hawaii call their island home paradise. But just about a minute before the ships were to raise their colors, this happens at 8 a.m., as David said, the first of two waves of Japanese air attacks began. What happened next was one of the worst military disasters in the U.S. military history. It was grim. A dozen ships were sunk and over 2,000 men were killed. The effect on America was immediate and overwhelming. We were at war, but there's another story most people don't know about. With all that was happening, it has for many been lost to history. And that's even in the midst of military disaster. The Pacific Fleet, much of which was sitting on the bottom of Pearl Harbor, was brought back to life in one of the most amazing naval salvage and recovery operations in history. Within a few weeks, shipbuilders from the East and West Coast shipyards were hard at work, raising, righting, and bringing much of the sunken fleet back to life. It still staggers the imagination that it could even be done. One man who played an important role in this remarkable effort was the Commander Hyman Rickover. His ability to innovate, improvise, and get things done was nothing short of amazing. Rickover later went on to become a three-star admiral and father of the nuclear navy. Raising the fleet was a phenomenal engineering challenge. Nothing on this scale had ever been attempted before, but remarkably, in a matter of months, 4 battleships and 3 destroyers were refloated and back in action. We didn't take away from the pain of the day. The loss of life and destruction was immense, but it did demonstrate, in a rather awesome way, just how resilient the United States can be in a time of crisis.
That's a good story.
Thank you.
And now we're going to break and hear from George about the sports.
Thanks, guys. George Kerns here for CVTV Sports. In NFL news, the Washington Redskins picked up another victory this past weekend as they beat the Carolina Panthers, and they will play the Green Bay Packers and Aaron Rodgers this Sunday. The Baltimore Ravens beat San Francisco on Sunday 20-17 as kicker Justin Tucker hit a field goal with no time left. The Ravens will play Buffalo this weekend. New England took another loss Sunday night at Houston 28-22 and are now in second place behind Baltimore for home field advantage. New England will play host to quarterback Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs this weekend. Dallas lost to Buffalo on Thanksgiving and Philadelphia lost to Miami, so Dallas still holds a 1-game lead in the NFC East with 4 games remaining. Dallas will play the Chicago Bears Thursday night on Fox. Seattle beat Minnesota in a good game on Monday night 37-30, so they keep pace with the San Francisco 49ers. The 49ers play the Saints and Seattle plays the Rams this weekend. In college football news, Virginia beat Virginia Tech 39-30 and will play for the ACC Championship Saturday night against Clemson. LSU will play Georgia in the SEC Championship. Ohio State will play Wisconsin in the Big Ten Championship. Ohio State remains number 1 in the college football playoff. LSU is 2, Clemson is 3rd, Georgia is 4th, Utah is 5, and Oklahoma is 6. Alabama lost to Auburn Saturday in a shootout 48-45 and have dropped back to 12th in the college football playoff. In high school football news, North Stafford and Colonial Forge won their region championship games and are now playing in the state semifinal games this Saturday. North Stafford will be at Stonebridge Saturday at 2 o'clock, and Colonial Forge will be at Oscar Smith at 2 o'clock also. Murray will play Varina in the other Class 5 semifinal, and Westfield will play host to South County in the other Class 6 semifinal. Good luck to the Wolverines and the Eagles. I will have more high school football in my VHSL report. Well, that's all the time I have for sports. I'm George Kerns for CVTV Sports. Back to you guys.
Thanks, George. You're always a wealth of information.
Well, that's all we have for you this week. Thank you for welcoming CVTV News into your home.
Be sure to like us on Facebook and subscribe to us on YouTube. You can also watch us streaming at cvtvnetwork.org. We'll see you next week.
That sounds
We
cool.
did that.
We did it.